Yeah.
All right, we are live.
Morning, everybody. My name's Alan Avery, Vice Chair of the Commission. Welcome to the Policy and Implementation Committee meeting of September 26th. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from August 29th, 2025. So
I
motion,
move that the minutes be adopted as submitted.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes stand approved. Thank you. I will now turn the agenda over to our executive director.
Okay. Here's Paul to bring you a Thursday.
Yep,
Um,
got a few things I gotta.
all right, we're getting ready. So, this morning, we're gonna be talking a little bit about the public comments that we received on the proposed CMP amendments. And I understand some of you had trouble opening them or downloading them on your computers. It is a huge file because we received many hundreds of emails. Unusual for us to receive this many comments on anything we do. Even more unusual that they're almost all positive.
By the way, having done this in my past lives, I applaud the way you put, no, I thought your responses were good, really well, really good. Staff did a nice job.
Great, well, then maybe we don't even have to talk about this, but, okay, so.
Right now.
Okay, so, public comments that we received, 490. I can't remember the last time a rule change resulted in that much, widespread support, and just the volume of comments was unusual. So we've tried to sort of categorize them here. Clearly, most of the comments, 97% probably, were all related in some fashion to redesignation of the Blackburn watershed, protecting Pinelands, preventing clearing and development, and saving the forest, and all of that were really the focus of vast majority of comments. There were then just a very small number of comments on the other parts of the amendment, which related to application fees, some changes there. Expiration of certain completeness documents, old waivers and certificates of filing. Some minor revisions, updates to requirements for the use of Pinelands development credits and the way that program works in regional growth areas, and the flexibility that municipalities have to meet their obligations. And then just a couple of other sort of unrelated comments. So here's the map that goes along with the proposed amendment to the Blackburn watershed. The big green blob sort of right in the middle there, that's the area that would be redesignated upon adoption of the amendments by the commission. 342 comments supported the redesignation for various reasons. We had one commenter who was concerned, this was an interesting one, concerned about how the redesignation to forest area would affect access to his property and potential development of a home in the future. It took a little bit of, it was a little confusing at first, but we did come to realize after looking at the map, and he provided his property information, that the lot he owns is not in the area that's being redesignated. It is a landlocked property to the south. His concern seemed to be that if nobody in the redesignated area develops their properties, there would never be any roads or streets or anything constructed so that he would have access and be able to develop. In any case, his property is not affected directly by the redesignation. The zoning for his property is remaining the same. He did ask that the commission order granting of easements, and so we clarified in the response that the commission doesn't have that authority. We don't do that. And that the development potential of his property really is not affected directly by the redesignation. We received a number of comments that didn't specifically talk about the Black Run redesignation. A lot of them just said they opposed all development in the Black Run watershed. Encourage the commission to move forward with the amendments so the land would be preserved. Of course, you'll see in the responses, and we've talked about this before, the management area redesignation does not preserve anything. It reduces development potential in the area, reduces the intensity of development and the types of permitted uses. But the property, a lot of the area and the watershed remains privately owned. And the management area change or the zoning change does not eliminate development potential and does not result directly in land preservation. That's a separate process. That's also ongoing, but it is not part of the rule. A number of the commenters were asked that Evesham Township proceed immediately and already rezone the property or do it immediately. And in our response, we tried to explain once again that this is a large, very, very large management area change that only the commission can adopt. And once that happens, then the township is obligated to implement it through their own zoning ordinance and zoning plan. We are already working with Evesham Township on that and believe that that will happen in fairly short order, assuming the commission adopts the amendment. So that process is already ongoing. And so we had 32 comments that just generally supported protecting the Pinelands, Kirkwood Cohansey Aquifer, all Pinelands resources. They weren't specific to the Black Run, but were clearly being submitted because of the change that we're proposing. We had one commenter who indicated strong support for the management area redesignation, but asked that, or said he wished that the amendments had included provisions for trails, new trails, accessible trails, that we should require that any trails that are developed in the area be accessible for all. And in our response, we just clarified that, you know, the rule doesn't call for development of trails, doesn't approve trails, doesn't create new preserved open space. We are aware of the need for accessible trails here and throughout the Pinelands and are working on that, but that's part of a separate process, separate rule making that we will be discussing with the commission at a later date. It's not part of this. Other topics, application fees, where the rules would increase fees for applications that are submitted to or involved in resolving an identified violation of the CMP. We have increased fees for certain types of letters of interpretation, mostly related to wetlands delineations and verifications. A $250 fee for an application involving the waiver of strict compliance. We received 2 comments, both in support of the proposed fee amendments. We got 3 comments that are related to the amendments that propose the expiration of certain completeness documents and old, very old waivers of strict compliance. These are waivers that were issued before 1992, sometime between like 85 and 92 or so. There's still a category that have not expired yet. And then certificates of filing as well, and certificates of completeness that were. There's been many names over the years, but for the most part, we're talking about these old waivers and certificates of filing. The comments we received asked for the commission to provide an additional grace period for people who have an old certificate of filing, so that they have more time to effectively use it before it expires. We had another commenter suggest that certificates of filing should remain valid while an applicant is pursuing local approvals, however long that takes. We had one commenter, I think the same commenter, suggests that having an expiration date actually results in a taking of property. Talk about that. That was a surprise to me. I'll show you that in a minute. So a little more detail about the grace period. Remember, these are, for the most part, we were talking about certificates of filing that were issued before 2004 would all expire upon the effective date of the amendments. If you have a certificate of filing issued after that, it would also expire if it was never used, essentially, if we issued it and nothing ever happened. You know, they didn't pursue development, they didn't get any approvals, they didn't submit the approvals to the commission, we didn't sign off on the approvals. Those will expire within a 5-year period, so there's a good number of applicants and property owners that we identified were in that situation. You can see there about 1,600. We notified all of them either via email or old-fashioned mail, which was fun because we don't normally communicate with people through sending actual hard copies of letters anymore. But these things are so old, we don't have email addresses or contacts for a lot of these applicants and property owners. So those notices all went out in August, giving people an understanding of the amendments and what the expiration date would mean specifically for their certificate of filing. So in response to the suggestion that we need to provide more time for people, this is one of the things we said in our response, which is that the executive director already has the ability under the current rules to review an approval and determine that it doesn't raise any substantial issues with respect to all of our CMP standards and allow the approval to take effect. So that authority exists under the rules and has existed for 40+ years. We do occasionally look at an approval and think, well, it might have a small issue with it or something that's a little different, but we have the ability to sign off on these approvals, even if they're not completely strictly consistent with every CMP standard in the municipal zoning. That'll be the case here too, so that if somebody has an old certificate of filing and goes and gets an approval, a building permit saying they submit it, December 15th. And the rule takes effect, let's just say the next day. We have the ability to look at that situation and say, okay, you got your approval, the project's fully consistent with the CMP, we can sign off on that even after the expiration date of the certificate of filing. So there is some leeway, as there always has been, and we intend to use that where it's appropriate, and are working now on just putting together some internal guidance and policies about how to deal with all of these certificates of filing, and I guess even waivers that are gonna fall into various different categories. And again, how to provide additional notice to people, website notices, working with the town so they know what's going on. And just making sure that everybody's aware of the situation. And worst thing that happens, the certificate of filing expires, the person will need to submit a new application to the commission. And just keep in mind that in most cases, these certificates of filing are very old. And zoning has changed, CMP has changed numerous times. It's in their interest to reapply and have the commission evaluate to make sure that the development is consistent with all the current rules. Because if they don't do that and they go off to the town and get an approval and send it back to us, and the rules have changed, zoning has changed, we aren't gonna be able to sign off on it. And that will all be in this very confusing period of time. So this is what we're already starting to suggest to people that, it would be better. If you've got a CF from 1987 that you submit a new application, 90-some% of our applications are for one single family dwelling. So that's really the bulk of what we're talking about here.
Excuse me, sir, the first bullet up there, should that read issued before 2004?
No. The people that we notified were those with certificates of filing issued after 2004. Because they're the ones who, if they want to keep their certificate of filing valid, they can by getting an approval and sending it to us.
Okay.
Before 2004, they're going to expire automatically upon the expiration date of the rule. And we've corresponded and communicated with a lot of those people too.
Okay.
We just didn't do a mass mailing because that would have been almost impossible. We got a lot of, how many bounce backs did we get, like returned mail?
About 190.
Yeah,
How many old people been sitting out there from by before?
surprising number.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, then in response to the suggestion that assigning an expiration date constitutes a taking, our response was pretty simple, which is certificates of filing are not approvals, they don't confer property rights, they don't confer development rights, they are completeness documents. They're just the document that somebody needs to be able to go to the town and seek approvals, and so there's no taking that's occurring. What else? The same person suggested that in general, certificate of filing, once it's issued, it should remain in effect while the applicant seeks local permits and approvals and assembles land. That was an interesting add-on to that. And in reality, this is what happens today without the amendment. We issue a certificate of filing and somebody, it's valid forever, and somebody can just go use it and take, 20 years to get a local permit or approval. And that's exactly what we're trying to deal with by assigning the expiration date, because that is just over the years created so many issues for the commission, for the municipalities, for the property owners. So we don't think that this is advisable. This is what we're trying to change. And we think that assigning a 5-year lifespan to certificates of filing does provide sufficient period of time. Again, the applicant, once they receive that document, all they have to do is get one permit or approval. We're not saying you have to go get preliminary site plan approval and final site plan approval and all your building permits. We're saying just go get one, get a zoning permit, get a use variance, get one building permit, get one septic permit that we can review and sign off on as consistent with the rules. And then your certificate of filing is good forever. That's how you use the certificate of filing. You have this 5-year period after you've been here with your application, and we've probably tortured the applicant for a year or two, just getting everything in order. We've got everything. We've got the stormwater plans, we've got threatened endangered species surveys, we've got wetlands delineations, everything is done. And any issues are identified at that time. So they have all the information they need to be able to resolve any inconsistencies. And the plans are done, the site plans are done, and they can submit those to the town. So I mean, our recommendation is we not change the amendment at all, that this is in fact what we are trying to do, is to encourage applicants to proceed in a timely fashion to use their certificates of filing. And once that, they go through that process by getting one approval, submitting it to us, resolving anything that was inconsistent, which is specifically identified in the certificate of filing, and we can issue a letter saying, okay, the approval takes effect, then they don't need to worry about expiration of the certificate of filing anymore. And frankly, I think I used the word impractical here, but suggesting that certificates of filing should remain in effect essentially for some indefinite period of time while an applicant seeks permits and approvals and assembles land, whatever that means. We don't think that's not something we can keep track of, and it just creates chaos when so many years, decades in some cases, go by. So that's exactly what the amendment is designed to stop. We don't want that to keep happening. We want to be able to keep current and help applicants keep current on the rules and their approval process, so. PAC program and regional growth areas really didn't result in much in the way of public comment. Not really surprising, because we weren't really changing anything substantive in the PDC program rules. We were trying to make them clearer about what municipalities have the flexibility to do when they're designing their zoning plans for regional growth areas. These are things that the commission has found ways to do in working with municipalities over the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. When they've come to the commission to say we want to do something slightly creative or different, we want to shift some of the PDC obligation from its normal residential development type to a non-residential development project, so that the PDCs are still being used just for different types of development. They're looking for ways to deal with their affordable housing obligations, which Brad's gonna talk about later in the meeting, but this is not a new thing. We have been hearing about this and working with towns on redevelopment plans, for example, that focus in on a specific site where they want to, have the property owner or developer produce a certain number of affordable housing units. And we've been able to come up with ways to exempt those affordable units from the PDC obligation while still meeting the overall goals and intents of the PDC program, the regional growth area rules. So we tried to write some of that into the amendments, so that would be there in a more clear fashion about what towns can do and what rules apply when they want to change their densities or do creative things for the use of PDCs.
Question, with regard to allowing a municipality to exempt affordable housing from PDC use, does that allow the municipality to increase the density within the regional growth area without providing PDCs?
Trying to make sure, so no, I'll say, if they want to also increase the density, then, typically what we do is. Have the town adopt a mandatory requirement for the use of PDC that recognizes that if they're getting additional development. The affordable units might be exempt, but the market rate units, of which there will be more now, because the zoning expired. PDC obligation doesn't get reduced overall, yeah, that's what we're.
Thank you.
There was actually one comment in support of allowing towns to shift PDC opportunities from residential to non-residential development. I happen to think that's a key change that the commission should be willing to consider. It allows towns to capture different markets and changing demand while not negatively impacting the PDC program. So we may well see more of that in the future. We did receive one comment about affordable housing in the PDC program. This person suggested that it shouldn't just be the affordable units in a development project that are exempt from PDC use. It should be all the units in any project that contains any affordable housing units. And that the commission should actually require that towns exempt all the affordable units in projects from PDCs. Not just provide towns with the ability to do some exemptions, but we should require that for affordable units. And in our response, we first said, as a reminder to everyone, that the Pinelands Protection Act specifically prohibits the commission from considering the number of low and moderate income housing units that are being provided in an ordinance or master plan or development application as a factor in whether or not we should approve that ordinance or application. We are not allowed to say, oh, this is an affordable housing project, therefore it's approved. Or yes, town, you can zone for that in a way that's different somehow because it contains affordable units. We have to be very careful about that. This is I can't think of the right word, but this is something that long ago in the mid-80s, when the Fair Housing Act was adopted, this authority was removed from the commission. We used to have affordable housing standards in the CMP, believe it or not. And when the Fair Housing Act was done, the state decided, well, now the commission doesn't need to do that because we have a Fair Housing Act. We had a council on affordable housing at that time to administer affordable housing throughout the state. So the commission was specifically prohibited from using that as a factor in determining whether to approve something. So we have to tread a little carefully when we review ordinances or redevelopment plans. For example, if the town decides that they want to provide affordable housing in a certain zoning district, that's their choice. It's not something the commission can or should be requiring. Our job is to say, well, how can that be done in a manner that's consistent with all of the other CMP standards? Which most often is the PDC program, is what's affected, but sometimes densities as well. If a town adopts, if it has a big vacant area and they're adopting, a density of, I'll say something ridiculous, 20 units per acre, and they want to permit high-rise apartments in the middle of a regional growth area where there's limited sewer and water, for example, that That's an issue, not because they're trying to promote affordable housing, but because the infrastructure isn't available to support that density, so. We cannot require towns to do zoning for affordable housing. We cannot require them to exempt certain types of units. These are under our rules, these are things municipalities are enabled to do if they so choose. That's the municipal flexibility that the CMP has always provided. They can adjust their densities, they can provide for a mixture of housing types. They can zone for non-residential development, as long as they're maintaining PDC opportunities, demand for credits. They have a lot of ways of adapting to changing markets, and that we think is appropriate for the commission. There are obviously other state laws and programs at work that towns need to be consistent with, but commission can really only do what's in the CMP, not these other things. And then as far as the suggestion goes for that all development in a project that contains any affordable units, that should, all those units should be exempt from PDCs. I think the commenter there is referring to what people normally refer to as inclusionary development projects, where there's a percentage of the units that are affordable and the rest are market rate. For the most part, the commission has been able to approve zoning plans that provide for inclusionary development that exempt 15-20% of the units. Those are the affordable portion from the PDC obligation, but the market rate units have a PDC obligation. If we were to eliminate the PDC obligation from all the market rate units, it would have a huge and very significant negative impact on the PDC program. So a broad brush approach like that would not work. Doesn't mean that there's going to be some limited zones or properties or redevelopment areas where that could be done if the municipality wanted to shift its PDC obligation on the properties. But we don't have the ability to just wipe that number of PDC opportunities off the table. Other comments, one said rule proposal must be supported in general, we like that. And another said deforestation in Pinelands should be prohibited, again, not the subject of the rule amendment. Black Run Watershed redesignation is not about deforestation. It is a zoning change effectively, so that's not what the rule is about. Process, just to remind everyone of all the various steps in the rulemaking process. The proposal was published in mid-June. We had our hearing in July. We accepted comments through mid-August. We are not recommending any changes to the language of the rule proposal, and we think that it should be adopted as exactly as it was proposed. We prepared the draft adoption notice that we sent to all of you, and at the same time, I submitted that to the governor's office, to their proposed rules office, as we are required to do, before we can put the adoption on the commission's agenda for formal action. Normally, that process takes months before we receive approval. Had a couple phone calls with our liaison in the governor's office late last week. And on Monday, we received approval to move forward with adoption of the rule. That's never happened in the history of ever, where anything ever happened that fast in government. But anyway, it was a great response, very quick. So I think largely because we didn't recommend any changes, the rule wasn't controversial. We received widespread support. And the administration is interested in moving forward and getting these rules adopted. So that enables us to be here today with our recommendation to you all, hoping that you in turn will make a recommendation to the full commission for adoption of the rules. And then we can put them on the agenda for commission adoption in October 10th. And then you can see how the process would play out after that. If the commission adopted the rule, there's a 30 working day veto period for the minutes of that commission meeting, which would take us to about December 10th. But that's when we would need to submit the rule for publication to the Office of Administrative Law. And then it could be published in the register that first week of January 2026. So that's the schedule that we see ahead for the rule, and that's it. So if there are any questions, please, or anything.
Is there any chance that the governor's approval or the minutes become sooner and we could get this just maybe a little bit, before
Well,
the year?
So it's, of course, it's a possibility. We would have to formally request that. They don't normally do it. It's a very formal action and a letter from the governor. I wouldn't suggest it because remember, we have notified all these people,
Right.
whose certificates of filing are going to expire.
Okay.
When we sent out those letters, we said early January. I really don't think it would be appropriate to adopt the rule sooner and have a sooner effective date and then say to people, oh, no, it's not January, it's December. So I think this is the best schedule where it's a good schedule, it's expedited, believe it or not. So that the rule will be published and effective in that first week of January.
It becomes effective, it's published.
Yeah, so that's pretty fair. I think so. I don't see any need to move more quickly.
I just wondered if it would happen, that's all.
Um,
Given that we've got a election.
And change, okay, yeah.
Changing the.
I think that
Concerned about.
I can only think of maybe one or two times in the past where we've been able to get that kind of expedited approval. They don't really like to do it.
Okay.
And in this case, I didn't suggest it either.
On those waiver of compliances, you've reached out to whoever you can prior to 1992.
So the
Which
waivers,
ones are-
the waiver people who are super old applications. The rule will provide them with an additional year of time. So we will be, once we know this schedule, we're gonna be notifying them. And telling them they actually have until January 2027
Okay.
for these old waivers. There are still a few out there.
Right, and
Not
many towns, you notified
And
of
we
the
will,
list.
and we will be letting the towns know how to deal with any that pop up.
Okay, perfect.
Again, there are not many, but there's always some, and we don't want people to be confused.
Any other questions by Commissioners? Jerry?
I'd just like to compliment the executive director and the staff for putting together such a monumental task. Good job.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Jerry's comment that it was an excellent summary. A great job at aggregating all the various concerns and in a courteous way addressing each of them. So I thought that was an outstanding job at providing a coherent response.
Thank you.
And I recommend that we move forward with
I have that those words too, because I know from reading command response documents from other state agencies, they are never nearly as polite and explanatory as what stands put together.
They don't get as many supportive comments as we do.
Well, right, and it did we.
Yeah, thank you for your comment.
We'll try to do more of this in the future.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend the rules proposal to the full commission for adoption.
Is there a second?
I second.
We moved to second. Are questions or comments on recommending the adoption of the proposed rules to the full commission? Hearing none, all in favor, aye? Is there anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Good job, Executive Director and staff. I'm still suspicious of all those birds. Next up is a presentation on the long-term water level monitoring program summary by a member of our science staff.
Yes, where's Chris?
Chris.
There he is. Come up here,
Chris Gender.
Vigner. Yeah, probably you guys have not met Chris before. How long have you been Chris?
Been here about 2.5 years.
Time flies. But I don't, other than seeing him at the commission when he was first hired, like he's always out with people, I never seen him either, so.
If you want some wood.
A wood canoe.
I already asked them.
We'll see how the presentation goes.
Yeah, well, sampling.
I'm there.
Do you not have one?
I accidentally exited out, did I flip back up or no?
Oh,
Never mind, I'll watch
Share,
share.
I could already share.
I'll watch Commissioner Iris, if he doesn't. remember.
Should probably still on the desktop.
Okay, thank you. I would've told you.
water reacts to it.
Oh, okay. I don't know what word it is.
That's got $100 up front.
I don't think you have to wait. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alright, so good morning, everyone. Today I'm gonna be providing an update on our long-term water level monitoring. We're gonna be reviewing what we've been doing, our recent updates and plans for future work. So our water level monitoring consists of monitoring groundwater in forest plots and surface water in ponds. All the work I'll be discussing today has been funded by the National Park Service. So groundwater monitoring is done by measuring water levels in shallow wells installed in forest plots. So the wells are made by drilling 1 to 2 meters below the surface with an auger. And a PVC sleeve is used to prevent the hole from collapsing until a slotted well pipe is inserted. Once the well pipe is inserted, the hole is backfilled. So the picture on the right is an example of the slotted PVC well pipe. And this would be about 1 to 2 meters under the ground. And the PVC pipe sticks up a little bit above the surface and there's a cap over it to prevent sand and debris from falling in. And this is where we would take our measurements down to the water table. So Joel Mott, the Pinelands Commission Communication Office, he measures groundwater levels manually each month. And he uses a water level meter, which is basically, it's a tape measure with a sensor on the end that beeps when it detects water. So he drops it down. When it beeps, that's how he knows how far down the water table is. So when we install our wells, they're installed in forest plots along an upland to wetland hydrologic gradient. So these gradients typically consist of pine oak uplands, pitch pine lowlands, pine maple swamps, we got maple swamps and cedar swamps. And the water table is much deeper in the uplands and very shallow in the swamps and wetlands. So the white bars in this figure would represent like our wells, and this is where we would be taking the water, the measurements down to the water table. And also sometimes ponds form where there's low points in the topography. And this would be where the water table intersects the ground surface. So the ponds that we sample, they're not fed by streams. They're basically low points in the topography where the water table is above the ground level. So groundwater, it's measured, we measure it in 33 forest plots each month, and 5 have been recorded since 1987. These were originally installed for Dr. Zampella's PhD work. These 5 forest plots have over 38 years of data so far. And we have an additional 28 forest plots that were added in 2004, which were installed as part of our Kirkwood Cohansey project. And these have about 21 years of data so far. So this is a map showing the locations of our 33 forest plots. Most of them were originally selected for the Kirkwood Cohansey project. We have wells along the McDonald's branch in Brendan Burns State Forest, Skip Branch in Warren State Forest, Albertson's Brook, also in Warren. See the East Branch of the Bass River in Bass River State Forest. And there's 6 along Morses Mill Stream, which is on the campus of Stockton University. So the forest plots on the campus of Stockton and at Albertson's Brook in Warren, we consider to be slightly impacted by development, whereas the other 3 we consider to be undeveloped. And this is an example of a hydrograph just from 2 of our forest plots from the McDonald's branch. So these were the ones originally installed by Dr. Zampella in 1987. And so on the left axis, we have the depth of the water table. And the zero on the top would be your ground level. So from the ground level, we're measuring down till we hit water. As you'd expect, the water table is much shallower in the pine maple swamps and much deeper in the uplands. The water table typically drops in the summer. So the high points you see on each of these, each year you would see a high point in the spring. And throughout the summer, the water table goes down, and we would generally these low points would be in the fall. So nothing to note on this figure in 1995, 1996, 2002, and 2008. I'm sorry, it was 95, 99, 2002, and 2008. We had very low water table, so particularly dry years. 2004 was the lowest we've seen in 38 years. And that was last year's drought. So also, just want to point out there was gaps in the data prior to 1994, and this is because originally the wells weren't measured in the winter months. So in 2017, we installed a data logger in a USGS well in McDonald's branch. So the data logger is a device that you drop down into the well and it automatically records the water level. For ours, we have them set to record every hour. So this forest plot was originally installed and began measuring it in 1987. So we have monthly data from 1987 until this data logger was installed in 2017. And from 2017 on, we have hourly water level data. So here we have a hydrograph. This is showing 8 years from that data logger. So just the previous 8 years of hourly data in the well. This is the one from McDonald's branch. And we can see that groundwater level in 2022, 23, and 24 had dropped much lower than the previous 5 years. So going back to 2017, the lowest level we've had recorded was in November of 2024. However, spring of 2024, the water table was at the highest point. So we had a very wet spring in 2024 and almost no rain throughout the summer, and it just went straight down to the lowest point we've ever seen. So in addition to the groundwater monitoring, we also measure surface water in 37 ponds. So 14 of our ponds have been monitored since 1996. And these were originally selected for fraud monitoring sites. And then 15 were added in 2004 for our Kirkwood Cohansey project. So five additional ponds were added in 2010 and 3 more in 2012. And these were selected to get a better distribution throughout the Pinelands. So between 2010 and 2015, we installed data loggers in some of these ponds. So we have 7 ponds now that are recording hourly water levels, and they're the ponds that are represented in the stars here. So they're here. And these locations were also selected to cover a large range of the Pinelands area. So in our 30 ponds without data loggers, the water level is measured manually every month with a tape measure or a meter stick. So someone will go out into the pond and we have stakes to designate the same spot. So it's getting measured in the exact same location every month. And yeah, they would just take a tape measure and see how deep the water is. All right, so these 2 graphs, they show 28 years of data from 2 ponds in Warren. The water level is on the left axis here in centimeters, and yeah, years across the bottom. Yeah, so this is showing data going back to 1986, and the points where the blue bar touches the 0 line, that would be when the pond was dry. So there's no water in the pond. So the figure on the top is Price Pond, and this is one of our deeper ponds that tends to hold water year round. So most years it never dries, but occasionally it does. And 2024, there was an extensive period where that pond was dry. The bottom graph is Albertson Pond, which tends to fill every year in the spring and dry throughout the summer. So this pond dries pretty much annually, and the water level is typically much shallower than Price. And if there's also, you'll notice some gaps in the data, and that's really due to the pond freezing in the wintertime. So if there's a sheet of ice on the pond, we're unable to get an accurate measurement of the depth of the pond. So this figure shows how different our 30 ponds are. The blue bars show the percent of months where that pond was measured, and that's going from 2016 to 2024. So for 9 years, the percent of months where that pond had water. The orange circles are showing the average depth of the pond. So water level is on the right side in centimeters, and the percent that the pond had water is on the left side. So on this figure, the deeper ponds would be towards the left. And some ponds, like the one we looked at in the previous figure, Price Pond, had water over 95% of the time that it was checked in the past 9 years. Whereas some of our shallower ponds, skin skeleton ponds, they've only had water less than 50% of the time. So over 50% of the time that they've been checked in the past 9 years, they've been completely dry. So the pond water levels change throughout the year. With January through May, over 90% of our pond measurements have water. They're rarely dry during those months. June, the ponds begin to dry, and throughout the summer, the number of ponds, dry ponds, it continues to, it basically increases more dry ponds. So by October, over half the ponds that we measure are dry. And the water level in the ponds begins increasing again, I guess, by December, and January, February, March, April, May, over 95 or 90% of our ponds have water. Oh, and the pictures on the left here, so this would be what our pond might look like in January, February when they're frozen. And that would be a time where we want to be able to take a measurement with a meter stick. And then the picture on the bottom, it's a typical example of what you'd see this time of year, where the ponds are just completely dry. So this graph shows the percent of our pond observations with water by year. And you can see in 2023 and 24, we had almost 50% of our pond observations were dry without water. Whereas the previous 5 years, there was much more water. With 2018 through 2021, almost 90% of our observations had water. So just the past 2 to 3 years have been particularly dry compared to the previous 5. And over the years, we occasionally find ponds damaged by off-road vehicles, which is a particular problem. When this happens, we'll notify the New Jersey Division of Parks and Forestry, and Parks and Forestry might install barriers to attempt to block access to the pond. So this is one of our ponds in Brendan Burn, and it's like someone took a truck and just drove circles around in it. And this is one in Warren where there was some really deep ruts in the pond, and Parks and Forestry installed these barriers after we notified them. So between 2010 and 2015, we installed 7 data loggers in our ponds. And these are the same type of data loggers I talked about with the well. It measures the water level hourly. The locations were selected to represent a wide distribution throughout the Pinelands. We have one at Collier's Mills in Jackson, Burn and Butterworth Ponds in Brendan Burn, Sleeper Pond in Wharton, Bourne, Bass River. And there's one unexpected pond in Unexpected Wildlife Refuge, and Button Pond at Peasley Wildlife Management Area. So the next couple slides, I'm just gonna talk about the process of installing the data loggers in the ponds. First, we drill a hole in the pond surface with an auger. And this is an example of what the well pipe would look like. There's a slotted metal pipe that would go into the hole that was drilled into the surface of the pond. And there's a solid metal pipe that's attached to it. So about from this point down would be under the surface level of the pond. This is all underwater, and the metal pipe sticks up above the water level. And then a data logger would be dropped into the pond. So the pressure sensor here goes down into the well pipe, and this would be sitting under the surface of the pond. Yeah, below the actual surface of the pond, not just the water. And this is a desiccant in here. So basically they keep the instruments inside the data logger dry, and this needs to be maintained about every 2 to 3 months. So that's something that we have to go and check on these, download the data, and then replace the desiccant several times a year. So this graph shows 13 years of water level data recorded hourly at one of our data logger ponds. This is Button Pond at Peasley Wildlife Management Area, and it's close to Beltane State Forest. So the zero along the bottom would be when the pond is dry, or that's basically the pond surface. And again, the spike you see every year was typically when the pond is the deepest in the spring. And then there's a drying period throughout the summer, and the fall is typically the dry point or the lowest point on the graph. Some years this pond holds water year round and never dries. You can see that here. But it looks like the past 4 years, the pond has dried down, and there was a particularly long dry period in 2024. So that was during the drought last year. And another thing I want to point out here is occasionally there's a gap in the data here, and occasionally we might have an issue with our data logger where it malfunctions. And with this type of data logger, we want to know that until we go back and check the logger and change the desiccant, download the data, and if there's an error, then we would have to either fix the logger or have it replaced at that point. So that can account for lost data. So last year we began replacing some of our data loggers with remote weather stations. These weather stations allow us to view real-time data on the internet, which prevents the chance of having any data loss. Eventually, we'd like to make the data available on the Pinelands Commission Science webpage so that people can log on and view live data from our weather stations. So right now, we have remote weather stations at Button Pond, Butterworth Pond, and one at Collier's Mills. So for this type of weather station, the depth sensor or pressure gauges drop down below the water surface, the same as the other one. However, this has a small computer here that connects to cell towers. So basically we can view the data live. We have rain gauge on here, which the other data loggers don't have any other sensors. So these allow us to look at real-time rain, air temperature, humidity. So there's additional data that we're getting from these weather stations. So the rain gauges are basically a funnel that as it collects the water, and there's a small cup inside that each time that cup tips, it's measuring 0.2 millimeters of rain. So they're very sensitive as far as measuring rain. There's little spikes above the funnel here that basically prevent birds from either perching or nesting inside the funnel, which they could be dropping debris in there, and it prevents basically the amount of trips that we have to take to the pond to clean them out. There are also solar panels, so there's no batteries to change. If the solar panel recharges an internal battery, so if we have to get several weeks without sun, they can continue running for up to 3 months without sun. They're also measuring air temperature and humidity, which is inside the solar radiation shield. And that shield just prevents the sun from heating up the air temperature sensor, so we get a more accurate reading. And it also prevents the humidity sensor from getting wet from rain. And they're measuring barometric pressure. And see, and also water temperature. So yeah, we're getting a lot more data from this type of weather station. So, our let's see, our remote weather stations have several other advantages. They basically reduce the number of trips that we need to take to the ponds, so there's no desk in the change and no batteries. We're getting the real-time data, so we can check to see what the water levels are at any time in that pond. And if there's ever an error, say one of the sensor fails, or it fails to connect to the cell tower, we actually get an immediate email warning, so we can head right down to the pond and try to figure out what's going on. Which, prevents any lost data. And they're fully customizable, so if we ever decide to add additional sensors in the future, we could potentially add wind sensors or light sensors. There's like a lot of other options with these. So this is just a map showing the locations of our current 3 remote weather stations. We have one at Colliers Mills and Jackson, Butterworth Pond and Brendan Burn, and Button Pond, down at Peasley. And these were all installed in 2024, so we have about a year of data on them so far. And this is just an example of the real-time data that I would see when I log into the website. I can check on the status of the station and just shows that it's logging. All the data has been sent and it's up to date, and the next connection, it says it's scheduled for 11 minutes here. And I can check and see the water level, water temperature, barometric pressure, temperature, if there's any rain today, and the relative humidity. And this is just data from the month of August this year from our weather station at Colliers Mills. And you can see with each rain event, it corresponds exactly with an increase in the pond water level. So this is a really big advantage to have water rain data at the exact location of the pond. And this is a picture of basically this was the day I was installing the weather station at Colliers Mills last year in October 2024. And this pond is typically full of water and it was almost completely dry. And you can see there's the weather station out here. So this is the all the data we have from the weather station so far for rain and water level. So you can see the pond was dry when I installed the station back in October. And we had a big rain event, which only about 4 centimeters of rain, but it was enough to add almost 25 centimeters of water to the pond. Several small rain events in November, which continued to increase the water level in the pond. And it continued to increase through May. And there's, even though we've had a bit of rain in 2025 this summer, it's been dropping off a little bit. So this is towards the end of August, we've had about half a meter of water in that pond. And you can see that the pictures up here, that's the day I installed the pond, it was just about 15 centimeters of mud out there. And this picture is kind of hard to see, but there were a lot of little fish and tadpoles were just flopping around in the mud because there was no water. So I thought that was interesting. Because this was the first time that we've ever seen Colliers Mills Pond dry since we started measuring water levels there all the way back to 2012. And this is the data from our weather station at Button Pond. So we have rain and water level in orange. This is our pond that's down near Belle Plaine State Forest. And you can see, like, when I installed the pond in October, it was extremely dry. And And at that point, I was able to measure down to the water table in the pond here, so in this pipe, I could drop one of the, where is it? In the pipe here, this is the day I installed the station. The pond was completely dry here. I was able to drop the water level, tape measure down, and it was over 1 meter below the pond surface to hit water. So you can see in the fall last year and throughout the winter, there were several rain events down at this pond, but all that water just soaked right into the water table or down below the surface because the pond, even up through March, didn't begin really holding water until mid-March or April. So the picture I have here in the bottom picture is what the pond looked like by May. So at this point, and the pond was pretty full of water. But yeah, last year during the drought in 2024, it was completely dry. So we have the 3 weather stations installed, and then the 4 other ponds here in white are the ones where we have the hourly data loggers. We have 1 additional weather station that's purchased, and we're looking to install either a sleeper or horn, so that one should be going up soon. And eventually, we'd like to replace at least 2 more, like either porn or unexpected. And if we install the one we currently have now as sleeper, that would give us a better distribution throughout the Pinelands. So for our next steps, we're aiming to get the real-time weather data live on the Pinelands Commission Science webpage. This will allow anyone to log in and view the current conditions in our ponds and also view our climate data, such as the air temp, humidity, and rain. We also plan on analyzing our existing long-term data for trends. We're looking to see if water levels have been increasing or decreasing, and if there's any regional differences. So that's an overview of the methods for measuring surface water and groundwater and the data that we currently have available. Yeah, if there's any questions at this time, that's all I have.
Any questions or comments out of the commission?
Yes, they have one.
Yes, good.
This is wonderful. I would really like to see the weather stations go in because I had all sorts of questions about response to rainfall. So that's perfect. So that's lovely. Okay. And I hope you get funding for the issue. Yeah, they're not inexpensive.
Yeah, so do I, because it saves a lot of time with driving to these ponds to check the data loggers and.
That's true. The cost of the unit is offset by the.
Right.
Okay. I have one question about the responsivity of the difference in response to rainfall at Collierville versus the Button. Is that due to the fact that the antecedent condition of Button was so low? It was in other words, the water level was so low.
Yes.
Button that it just that rainfall had to fill up. It was because there's a big difference in responsivity.
Right. So Button is typically a shower anyway, because Collier's, that was the first time we've ever seen it dry in 2024. Whereas Button has dried a few times in the past, so it's a shallower pond.
Okay.
So in general, it can dry more, whereas Collier's typically holds water. It looks like a much deeper pond, and so the water table was much lower there. When I measured it, when I said Collier's was dry, it was only a few centimeters below the surface, whereas at Bottom Pond, it was almost a full meter below the surface. So it took a lot more rain to raise the water table for the pond to begin to start holding water again.
And do we know how long a pond can stay dry before we begin to see impacts to the animals, the flora, fauna, and
I'm not an expert on that, but I think John and I might be able to answer those questions.
Well, for frogs, it might live 2 or 5 years, so you could have a drought or 2 in their lifespan and they would be okay, but extended droughts or ponds drying too early before metamorphosis year after year would definitely be a problem.
so the seasonality of it also makes a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just curious, the well points installed, generally how deep did you install them?
I believe they're about 1 to 2 meters below, so it's just the, yeah, if they were in upland, obviously they'd have to be a lot deeper to get down to the water table, and the wetlands, they could be about 1 meter. So the uplands, some of them are over 2 meters, or about 2 meters deep.
The reason I ask is because obviously the trend appears to be the groundwater is subsiding. And so if the well point isn't deep enough.
Right, we would have to re-drill and lower them.
Drilling them.
Right, if that's an issue, in 2024, we did have, a few of our wells that bottomed out. And that was the first time on some of them where we weren't able to get water even all the way at the bottom of the well.
So the newest ones that are installed might wanna go deep.
Yeah, it's a good point, right?
Fair.
Right. Have you done like a comparative study with the fires? When the water is pretty much not there, of where it compares to where our fires are? Have you guys done that at all?
I haven't done much with fires, but I can say when I just being out in the field in 2024, we had several fires last year in Warren that, yeah, I can't say much about the drought, but obviously if the forest is drier, the fires are gonna be worse.
Yeah.
Did you consider any water mounding as related to the groundwater? Mounding of water under in other words, under a pond that collects water and holds water for an extended period of time, we would expect the water table to be higher under that by a mounding condition, as opposed to an area where we don't have an overabundance of water.
Right,
The phenomena of mounding may affect you.
yeah, that's,
Actually, the ponds are really just a hole in the landscape that shows us the water table. They're actually a discharge zone, so the water's going down gradient and feeding into the pond through the banks. As well as coming up from the bottom, so you can sort of the opposite of mounted.
John, it appears that the monitoring sites were chosen for their remoteness from development, is that correct?
Most of the ponds are around state land, yeah, so they'd be great for monitoring changes that are happening large scale. But we did select a few like unexpected pond and some other southern ponds that were near agricultural areas, just to see if we could see differences. For the wells, most of those are, well, I think it's all the softener on state land, but when we did the KC project, we compared water levels among the different areas, and Albertson Brook and Morrison Mill Stream did show some impacts compared to the areas without any land uses. So we do have kind of an array.
Okay, thank you.
Are those the wells you just talked about, are they also away from any from withdrawal wells or municipal use, for example?
The ones
Potable water wells?
The ones in Albertson and Stockton are within
Okay.
areas where there'd be impacts.
Okay.
Even from like in Stockton and Albertson, some of the irrigation for turf fields that aren't too far away.
So there are any areas where we're actually using water and it could be left. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have one.
Sure, Mark. Go
There was
ahead.
discussion about, the long-term use of this data, the fact that it's been compiled over years and it's going to allow us to do studies, long-term studies. But I'm wondering if you could talk to things like more immediate use of this data. I would imagine that this data probably helps inform DEP drought policy decisions perhaps, or, water allocation, permitting perhaps. I mean, could you speak to that?
Sure, yeah, all of these sites were established as part of other studies. So in the early 90s, we did a frog study, we picked a group of ponds and we continued to monitor them. We added sites in the early 2000s when we started the KC project. So everything that he's shown you has been used in previous research, some multiple studies.
Mhm.
Yeah, it could be used instantaneously today for other things. For sure. That's one of the reasons we want to get the data online so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
Right now, we have our well data publicly accessible, but it's just a PDF file and it's really awkward and funky. So it'd be nice if somebody could actually download. We had somebody, I think from the federal government asked for our water well data the other day, and they couldn't believe that we actually had it available. So that was nice to hear.
So just curious, John, how much do those automated stations cost? Are they?
So the whole station with all the sensors, it's about $2,000 to set it up. And there's an annual the data plan, which is about $200. So that allows us to access the live data where the data is getting uploaded.
Is that the data plan, is that one license or?
It's for each individual, yeah, for each individual site.
They always get you.
Yeah. They do have a lower cost version, but you would have limited, you'd have to scale your data back on. So the more data you're collecting, you're uploading more data and the price is a little bit higher, so. There's different tiers of data plans, yeah.
You had any problem with vandalism?
Not yet. We haven't had much problems with any of the ponds because it's out in the middle and there's often water. But there is even shooting guns at them. We have had problems with wells in the past.
So the main computer here, we secured it inside basically it's a altered camera box where you put a trail camera in. So there's a metal security box there and there's a padlock on it and it's actually bolted to the pole. So someone couldn't just come up and take the computer. It would take a bit of work to remove it. So hopefully that protects it.
I'm pleased that the weather stations and I found that very reasonable. I remember costs of something like continuous DO monitors being like $10,000.
Right, the price is very reasonable and the hourly data loggers that we have, the batteries are not replaceable, so they have about a 5-year life and they're almost $1,000. So for $2,000, these the rechargeable battery is replaceable, so if eventually the battery stops charging, you could just replace that battery. So these are more cost effective like in the long term.
I hope the National Park Service continues to be generous with that.
Well, thank you.
One of the best things is we would, quarterly, we would go download data from these sites. And you get down, you get the data, and you grab your desk and you come back to drive the desk out and you look and you didn't have any data. And you just have this big gap. Now, especially you get email, if there's any kind of problem right away, you can run out there and fix it. You don't use any data. We don't have to drive down there unless there's a problem. Some of these are about 3 hours run trip.
Yeah, or you could take a half day to do like 2 of them down, to get down to Bell Plain.
Yeah, so my son works for USGS in the continuous monitoring program. And I can't tell you how many days he has a plan for the day. And he gets in the office and he has totally scrapped that idea to go fix something that broke. And the only reason it broke is because they get an email. So it's really, really cool technology.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we could, in our budget, include a couple of stations?
We have one that we've already bought, right?
Mhm.
And.
I could certainly envision 2 more for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, they're very reasonable and would seem the offsetting cost of maintenance and traveling to the site would more than pay for the cost of. That would be my suggestion. The chairman had a budget.
We could also put a little plaque on it if the commissioner wanted to donate. And then they could have the Avery.
When I need to go to the gate and we have one station, I'll put an iron.
okay, that's it, new fundraising opportunity.
There we go. Are there any other questions for Chris or John? Very interesting.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very,
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
See you in a couple of years.
Hopefully sooner, yeah.
I hope so.
Brad? Brad, you're up. Affordable housing plans, my favorite subject.
Less fun.
Less fun, cool.
I didn't include any pictures of me doing work at my desk. All right.
Alright, hold on a second. A few more things.
So I can just start off by saying that this is really just an update. There's nothing actionable that needs to be taken up by the committee today. I gave a presentation back in February where, you know, we kind of went over the history of affordable housing in New Jersey, going over some, you know, basics around Mountain Laurel Doctrine, Fair Housing Act, COA, changes that occurred in 2015 that, you know, spurred the third round, and a lot of reviews that we undertook as a staff, and zoning changes that were related to those that came before the commission. We also I talked a little bit about the Fair Housing Act amendments that were adopted in 2004. These were largely addressing changes for the upcoming fourth round that was starting in July of this year. So it kind of incorporated some of the process, or built upon the process that that came out of the third round. So notably, I'll just mention, as you all probably have heard, COA was sort of abolished by these amendments, and sort of a replacement program was put into effect called the Affordable Housing Dispute Resolution Program. I'm just going to call it the program, and that is actually a body that is within the court system. So when I was talking in February, I mentioned that DCA was putting together the initial sort of calculations around the prospective need of additional housing, affordable housing units for each municipality. And that municipality, that was a non-binding calculation, and that it was municipalities had to adopt a binding resolution by the end of January, establishing what their prospective need is in order to maintain their immunity from exclusionary zoning lawsuits. So I talked a little bit about sort of what we would expect coming up in terms of towns adopting housing plans and what they might be doing to sort of meet their obligations. So we're fast forwarding to today, where I'm talking about the things that were submitted to the commission, what we've reviewed, what is sort of coming down the line. So towns that were engaging in this process, they were required to adopt and submit their housing plan by June 30th. So we've been reviewing a variety of plans from Pinelands municipalities since then. And as part of that process involving the program, people were interested parties were eligible to challenge these municipal plans, but those challenges had to be submitted by August 31st. So right now we're in this period where the program is sort of working through those various challenges. I really will spare the details about how that process is going to play out in the large, you know, this is the first time through, so I think they're sort of seeing how it works as they're going. But ideally, the amendments to the Fair Housing Act was showing December 31st as the deadline for a municipality to essentially revise their plans to resolve those challenges, or to somehow respond to the challenges in some other fashion that was satisfactory to the program. So whether or not, you know, the municipal housing element is challenged, ultimately the program conducts a limited review to ensure that it's sort of facially compliant with all of the requirements of the Fair Housing Act and their municipal obligations, and they would then issue a compliance certification that is good for this particular round, which is a 10-year period. So moving on to what we saw coming from the municipalities. So going back to that initial binding resolution that was required to be adopted by the end of this past January, we saw that 39 municipalities adopted a binding resolution, sort of indicating that they would be moving forward with, the rest of the process of putting together a compliant housing plan. 14 towns did not adopt, and it's not particularly surprising, as these were towns that had relatively small obligations where it was maybe 10 to 40 units. These were municipalities that did not participate in the third round. And really, to keep in mind, the reason why why municipalities were interested in going through this process is the protection from exclusionary zoning lawsuits. So, these are towns that are weighing sort of the risk to cost ratio of, if there's a low risk of these types of lawsuits in their municipality, then they're probably not gonna, fork out the financial resources to go through the housing planning process. So in terms of those, I'll go back, so we have 39 that adopted those binding resolutions. So where are we at in terms of reviewing those housing plans? So 21 of those housing plans were submitted to the commission. We've reviewed them and we have issued no substantial issue finding letters. Those have been coming through in our normal monthly memos to the commission. These are plans that largely had, no proposed sites within the Pinelands area portion of their town. They didn't have any draft ordinances or proposed zoning changes within the Pinelands area. So, somehow they were either their affordable housing obligation was being met with existing existing development and affordable housing on the ground, or it was all being sort of handled outside of the Pinelands area, or within the existing certified zoning within the Pinelands. Next category are those that are sort of at an incomplete status where it's been submitted, we've reviewed it, we've issued an incomplete letter. That's largely because they have some sort of proposed zoning change that they have not adopted an implementing ordinance yet. So a lot of these municipalities are waiting to adopt their implementing ordinances until they get through this challenge period. Because, just rather, to sort of wait and see if there's any challenges before going through and incurring the costs of going through, a zoning change process. We have three plans that are still pending review. I'll say there isn't really anything particularly notable about those. We've got another three plans that we are aware have been adopted but have not been submitted. One of those is for Tom's River, another one is for Springfield. We typically don't ask for those municipalities to submit those plans because they have very, very small areas within the Pinelands. So the third one that has not been submitted was from Jackson Township, which I'll touch on further on in the meeting or presentation. And then lastly, there were a couple towns that adopted the binding resolution, but then decided that was as far as they wanted to proceed in this process. And again, I think it was, it seemed like they wanted to indicate that they agreed with DCA's calculations, but did not feel that it was necessary to move forward with the complete planning process. And those were Egg Harbor City and Chesilhurst Borough. So one of the things that I talked about in the previous presentation was that there are various ways in which municipalities can sort of make adjustments to their prospective need that's the new sort of residential construction. Those include vacant land adjustments, which deal with municipalities that have inadequate developable lands. So this would include environmentally sensitive lands or lands that can't accommodate, 5 or more units. There's definitely a lot of other sort of factors, but those are kind of big ones. And then the other category is those that are seeking durational adjustments. So these are municipalities where there is not adequate public water or sewer to enable the intensity of development required to offset the cost of the affordable housing. So as expected, we did see, a number of our municipalities use either or in one case, both of these types of adjustments. So going back to those 37 that have adopted plans, about half of them had some sort of incorporated some sort of municipal adjustment that essentially either defers or adjusts down the amount of affordable housing units that they can provide. And that total number that was either deferred or left unmet was around a little over 1,000 units, which represented about 20% of the total fourth round prospective need for all of the Pinelands municipalities. These numbers are a little hard to sort of digest because we keep in mind that many of the municipalities in the Pinelands are split within and outside of the Pinelands. So this isn't to say these were all units that were slated to be put within the Pinelands. It's just more of a, a representation of Pinelands municipalities and sort of how they're grappling with these affordable housing obligations. So on this slide, what we're going to talk about a little bit more is proposed sites that are included within those housing plans that are slated for within the Pinelands. So again, we're back to the 37 plans that have been adopted. 27 of them had no Pineland sites, no new Pineland sites related to this fourth round. There may have been some where in the third round there were sites in the Pinelands or a prior round, but we've reviewed those, and so there's sort of nothing new about those 27 plans. The other 10 plans, there are sites within the Pinelands. 4 of them are proposed sites where what is being proposed meets the current certified zoning. So, if in some cases we actually have applications that are in process, and in other cases an applicant could come in and provided environmental standards could be met, the proposed development and plan would meet the existing certified zoning. And we have 6 other plans where there's some sort of zoning amendment that was being proposed as it relates to a site in the Pinelands. So, in terms of sites that are consistent with zoning, it's important to note that, these are occurring in places that we would anticipate, which is in our regional growth areas. Again, you can see that some of these, so, for instance, with Egg Harbor Township, it's showing that there's 2 sites. The total units is 363, the affordable units is 73. This is sort of, indicative of, what Sue referred to earlier as inclusionary housing development. So in almost all of these cases, the proposed project is showing, it's an inclusionary project where there's 15 to 20% of the total units being set aside as affordable. These projects are also typically going to be a mix of housing types, whether they're all townhouses, and apartments. In some cases, these are mixed use developments that may have a non-residential component as well. Moving on, so this is the one slide where we'll dive into the details a little bit more, because these are the instances where the proposed sites are, would require some sort of change in the certified zoning. So I'll start with Hamilton Township. They are, well, actually, both Galloway, Hamilton, and Monroe, they are all showing proposed projects that would require the adoption of a redevelopment plan. We have been in touch with Monroe, Hamilton, and Galloway on those matters, and we've provided them guidance on sort of what they would need to do to move forward. In the case of Hamilton and Monroe, these are in regional growth areas, and what is being proposed is largely in line with other types of redevelopment plans that we have seen and previously certified, so not too much of concern there. Same thing with Hamilton. We have worked with Hamilton on redevelopment plans in the past. Again, based on the description of the project, it's not something that is raising questions at this time. We have certainly recommended that all of these towns submit drafts of their redevelopment plans prior to adoption, to make sure everything is clear. So the big number that you are seeing jumping off the slide here is Jackson Township. As I noted earlier, Jackson has not submitted their plan to us as of yet. We were aware that their plan was adopted. And there are 4 sites included within the Pinelands area, and you can see in the management area column. There are 2 of the sites are within the regional growth area. One of the sites is in a rural development area, and one of the sites is in a Pinelands village. So these are, all of them are raising some level of concern for us, particularly the proposed sites within the rural development area in Pinelands Village. And so we are awaiting sort of further discussion with Jackson on those. And lastly, I'll just say with Waterford, they had a couple of sites where they were proposing just zoning changes from one regional growth area zone to another. So again, that's probably something that's very, if they wish to move forward with that, it should not be a problem. So sort of looking ahead, towns are, they have the December 31st deadline to update their plans in response to any challenges. That deadline may be, we may be looking at challenges related to these plans extending much further than that. We know that we've been engaged with the Fair Share Housing Center and have discussed with them sort of what their landscape is looking like. And they said for the most part, they are focused on plans in the north of the state, that there's not a whole lot in the Pinelands or in southern New Jersey. But nonetheless, any towns in Pinelands that are wrapped up in this process may be delayed as everything is sort of moving through this program. March 15th of next year is the deadline for any implementing ordinances in the plans to be adopted. So we are going to be seeing, of those incomplete sort of plans, we're going to be starting to see ordinances, I would anticipate early next year. But some towns may move forward if they are not challenged. So looking at sort of what I anticipate coming before this committee and the full commission are the redevelopment plans from Monroe, Hamilton, and Galloway. Like I said, they don't raise a lot of concerns at this point. And it's particularly with Monroe and Hamilton, I think they are looking to adopt those sooner rather than later. We have active applications related to both of those redevelopment plans. Jackson Township is the one with the question mark because we have a lot of questions around what they are planning to do with these sites. We have not had much, they have not sort of engaged with us in terms of these proposed sites. And so we are awaiting that conversation. And I'm happy to take any questions. So I would just sort of bookend it with saying that we've gone through a lot of the sort of the reviews, and really for the wide, for most of our Pinelands municipalities, this process is not raising much concern. We just have a few things left to review and what largely outstanding towns.
Have there been, I don't know if you can answer this, but have there been a lot of challenges to a municipal?
So when we met with Fair Share Housing Center, they said they were issuing somewhere in the range, and I want to say somewhere in the range of was it around 250 to 300 letters, and they were were challenges, and they said it was ranging from, we just need more information, like there's not enough information in a plan for us to determine a realistic opportunity is being given for a project, versus ones that are more, this does not look facially compliant, we have real concerns.
So some challenges, probably the majority of them were issued by Fair Share Housing,
Yes.
but there were. In one case, at least, we know that they challenged, but also several property owners or developers also challenged, so it's a mixture, I think it's. I suspect there's a lot,
Yes, and
and there will be a lot for the program to deal with. In the very short time period that the legislation provides, that's what Brett was referring to, that December deadline. Hard to understand how they're gonna get through all that so quickly.
so we are, one of the things that Fair Share Housing Center has offered to help us with is they know all the dockets for any of these challenges. So we've sort of given them the list of our towns to ask, do you, is there any in the Pinelands that you're aware that are being challenged? They gave us some information related to Ocean County municipalities. Jackson is on the radar.
They would have to act before we even get an opportunity, right? Or can we do it jointly?
So this is one of the things that was discussed in this, when we met with them, was that, the amendments to the Fair Housing Act, and even prior to that, the process laid out doesn't really take into consideration our process. So, if we've been able to act on some of these municipal plans because they've adopted them, submitted them, and they've met our requirements. The same thing would occur if they had adopted an ordinance and submitted it to us. We would proceed with our process. Now, in actuality, it would unlikely, I would imagine, be fairly unlikely that they would do that while their challenge is sort of in process. But it does raise the question of, what is our involvement if it makes it through the program and then gets to us and then we say, this doesn't work for you.
Right, exactly.
So it's one of the reasons why we were engaging with Fair Share Housing Center.
They don't know the answers either, we're all trying to figure that out, we're trying to figure this out as we go along. I mean, I think as Brad's saying, for the most part, I think he and his, they've been able to work very successfully and closely with the towns and. We really have narrowed it down to just one or two where we know there are issues that are gonna need to be resolved either through. If we can figure out a way to do zoning changes or management area changes, redevelopment plans that works for the commission, great. We may not be able to do that in all cases, and so that interaction with the municipality is gonna be very important. And with Fair Share, so that everybody's aware of our issues ahead of time.
I would assume several municipalities have created the challenges, so they will not have to.
That's very simple. I might have said that earlier this week. Well,
Yeah, and it's important to note that, when we're reviewing these plans, we are reviewing them with regard to our standards. We're not reviewing them to see if they're, an affordable housing plan that meets the statute. And, you can see there's a wide variety of complexity and different strategies that are taken. And it's a lot, in terms of the process of challenging these, it's a lot of information to weed through.
Right, is the is the definition of affordability, is it set as a standard for the state, or is it varied by region or by municipality?
I believe the answer to that is that it varies by housing region. So the state has divided the state up into, I want to say 7 or 8 housing regions, and I think the definition of low and moderate income is based on that region.
Okay, thank you, that's good that they not set this yet. The other thing is Jackson, generally what percentage of Jackson is either in the Pinelands Reserve or in And under the Pinelands Commission jurisdiction,
In terms of area,
how much is it?
I might be half, it might be 50% in the Pinelands area, 50% out. But the 50% that's in the Pinelands area, a good chunk of that is preservation area, forest area, preserved land. So much more limited amount of land, vacant developable land in the Pinelands area that remains available. It's not big.
Paul's gonna pull it up for.
Yes,
fiscal year.
it's gonna
Okay.
jack.
Yeah.
The economic.
Unless it came into,
I'm
we're gonna
especially,
go down to Ocean County.
I'm interested especially because.
Oh, yeah, why was I thinking of?
Right, right. 'Cause
Duh.
Jackson
Yeah.
had one. The Tom's River, right? And-
Under border, yeah.
And in fact, it's what happens in the bay, so and I don't know what that.
47%.
Very good.
Oh, but
And what's the percentage of the regional growth area?
that is 7%.
Large public land.
A lot, yes,
Cities in the
state, county,
Oh,
a
really?
lot of preserved lands in the preservation area. Rural development area, forest area, so you can see the orange there, I'll just scroll back up. It's not extensive, and that really is where the sewer service areas are.
Okay,
and
that's just,
Yeah, that's,
so
that's,
they're gonna be hard pressed to get those 4,000, I mean.
yeah, and I can say that Jackson has, I think, the highest fourth round perspective lead obligation of any Pinelands municipality. So it's, they clearly have a challenge in having to, plan for all of the units that, they've been obligated with.
and from what we could see in their plan, Brad showed you the 4 sites that are in the Pinelands area, they have an equal number of sites. Outside the Pinelands area and an equal number of units there as well, so, yeah, it's huge.
So. And there's no transfer development rights, so, right?
Oh, transfer allegations?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Not anymore. No, that was
That's
eliminated
what I thought.
several rounds ago.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brad? Know how to view this process? Seeing none. Brings us to public comment. Does any member of the public wish to make a comment that's in the room, just raise your hand. We'll put it on the internet. One. So ready to go? Can we go?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
No address.
Oh, name.
Who's like, redact that too. Use the.
Thank you.
Dr. Amy Golden, representing Black Run Preserve today, or the Friends of Black Run Preserve. On behalf of the Friends of the Black Run Preserve, we sincerely thank the Commission for moving the Black Run rule proposal changes forward. We understand that the redesignation changes will not take effect until January, but these impending changes have already had an impact. We are working with and wholly support the work that environmental groups are doing to negotiate with a majority landholder and to eventually achieve permanent preservation of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Sir?
Morning, Commissioners. Stephen Elliott, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I actually just had a quick question for Brad. Wondering what factors go into determining adequate or inadequate water when it comes to that durational adjustment that you were talking about. Is that solely existing infrastructure, or is water supply also a factor in it? Thanks.
Brad, do you have an answer? Off the top of your head?
I mean, yeah, it's not our determination, so.
Off the top of my head, I don't have an eloquent response, but
Yeah.
I can certainly chat with you actually, further.
Anybody else?
Hello, Renee Yeh, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. Just wanted to reiterate one of our comments on the package of amendments. Basically just that we were opposing the way that they have been packaged together. Things have proceeded, probably in the best way possible, like there were no holdups, but can imagine in a different set of circumstances, maybe if you had a holdup with one amendment, it would hold up just the whole package. And then even as Commissioner Rittler Sanchez proposed, maybe speeding things up for one thing. That was going to be interrupted by promises that were made with a different amendment. So just for a situation like this where you have very substantially different amendments, just the packaging of them together, although it will save you administrative hurdles, we just recommend against doing that again in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir. I would just say, Heidi, as you could see, no amendments to proceed at breakneck speed.
Hi,
Sure.
Ed Ferrugia, I'll represent today the Sturbridge Lakes Homeowners Association, which is a large environmentally sensitive community that's largely adjacent to the area that you're going to redesignate. And since I have come before to ask you to support this proposal, I just think it's appropriate at this time to come up and thank you for actually advancing it, and it's terrific. So great job, and thank you again.
Thank you. Any callers, Paul?
There are no callers.
Anybody else in the room care to make a comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Do any commissioners have anything to bring before the committee? Director,
No.
motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned and thank you.